Come see us doing live shows. We'll be in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only jimmydore.com. This is a ex-Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Her name is Dana Stroll. And here she is. She's going to tell you that the United States actually owns part of Syria. Well, listen to this. Watch this.
The United States still had compelling forms of leverage on the table to shape an outcome that was more conducive and protective of U.S. interests. And we identified.
She says the United States has leverage. You know what our leverage is? That we're illegally occupying their country.
Yep.
That's what she calls leverage. They talk about it like it's a real estate deal in Manhattan. Here she goes. Watch this.
Four. So the first one was the 1/3 of Syrian territory that was owned via the U.S. military.
That was owned. So this is our leverage, the 3 leverage points. The first one is 1/3 of Syria that is owned by the U.S. military. We didn't buy it. We didn't purchase it in a land deal. We illegally invaded their country, illegally, against international law, and are currently occupying it. You know that thing that everybody screams about what Putin did in Ukraine, how he illegally invaded? We did the same thing to Syria, which is right next door to Ukraine. And she says, we own it. Do you hear the language these people use? That's called imperialism. That's called hegemony. That's called chauvinism, Western show. It's every unbelievable thing. They just say it. It just rolls right off her tongue. We own 1/3 of it. Here, let's listen to it again. Here we go.
The United States still had compelling forms of leverage on the table
Compelling
to
forms
shape
of
an
leverage.
outcome that was more conducive and protective of U.S. interests. And we identified 4. So the first one was the 1/3 of Syrian territory that was owned via the U.S. military with its local partner, the Syrian Democratic Forces. Now, this was a light footprint on the U.S. military.
Do you see how these people talk?
Mafia.
That is exactly how the mafia talks. The United States is a mafia state. That's exactly how the mafia talks. We own it. Hey, look. Hey, what's all our oil doing underneath your land? Huh? It's a pity if something would happen. You got a nice country you got there. Be pity if something happened to it, huh? Guess what? We own it now. No, we own it. And here's my offer. Nothing. Sounds just like the Godfather. Because that's what it is. We're not there enforcing any rules-based order. We're not there providing democracy. We're not there defending people from a dictator. We're the mafia coming in and stealing shit. Let's listen to a little more.
About 1,000 troops over the course of the Syria Study Group's report, and then the tens of thousands of forces, both Kurdish and Arab, under the Syrian Democratic Forces. And that 1/3 of Syria is the resource-rich, it's the economic powerhouse of Syria. So where the hydrocarbons are, which...
Oh, and so the part of Syria that the U.S. military owns turns out to be the economic powerhouse. That's where all the hydrocarbons, she calls them. That means oil and gas. That's where it is. And then that's also where they make all their food. That's the rich farmland, the wheat. That's the part we took over. Richard, go ahead. Say what you'd like.
Yeah, it's just shocking, you know, and to that point about them being a mafia, I always call NATO a protection racket, right? It's exactly like the mafia, like, you know, it'd be a shame if someone did something to your country, right? So you better sign up to our program and pay us to protect you from us. You know, but and we shouldn't forget Turkey's a NATO country, right? So when we say NATO-backed revolution, you got 2 NATO armies in Syria right now, U.S. and Turkey, in addition to Israel. And that region she's talking about, and when I mentioned earlier the 1/3 of Syria, it's everything that's to the north and to the east of the Euphrates River, right? Remember, this is the Fertile Crescent. This is the cradle of civilization. This is where farming was invented, right? So that's how fertile we're talking. That's how important. And you know, Syria was a net exporter of wheat. So Syria had a surplus of wheat before the war. Bread was extraordinarily cheap. You know, people ate well. So I'm not going to say the country was perfect, but it was getting better and better. You know, the infrastructure was being modernized the whole time. New pavements the whole pavements being redone, roads being built, tunnels being, highway tunnels being dug, internet getting faster, no more electricity cuts. I saw that with my own eyes, right? Every single year was getting better and better, and then 2011 just set the country back decades. Now you get a few hours of electricity in Damascus. So and you got sanctions. I mean, they destroyed the country, and all this area they're occupying, Hasake Deir ez-Zor. These are the governorates in that 1/3 of Syria. It's got all the oil there, and they put U.S. military bases on the oil fields, right, to really make you understand who owns it. They put U.S. bases with U.S. flags, and they do patrols and just steal the oil, and then they ship it into Iraq, so they can more securely, evacuate the oil from their American bases in Iraq. And if you look at the companies that were extracting that oil, also based in Delaware, owned by a bunch of neocons, and just Syria. If you look at the top 10 exporters of oil in the world, Syria is not on that list. It's not like Iraq or Iran. It doesn't have that much oil, but what it represents to the Syrian economy is 1/4. So oil revenue is 1/4 of the government's revenue. That's how big and how important it was. And Syria, as a socialist country, you got free education, you got free healthcare. All of that is subsidized by the government. So by stealing the oil and stealing the crops, you're directly depriving Syria of that revenue and the Syrian people of their human rights and their standard of living. So, Syria also was growing lentils, cotton, you name it, right? So a lot of it was very self-sufficient in a lot of ways, and you can see what Gaddafi did with his country, how stable it was. He made it the most successful country in Africa, the richest. And again, you can't deny that there was improvement in the country. You can't deny it, and these people want to deny it so they can justify putting nut jobs and head choppers from Al Qaeda in power. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't do me. I was there, I saw it. And the country was getting better, and now they talk about it like it's a piece of real estate. It's disgusting, honestly.
And just to remind people before we wrecked Libya, that Gaddafi had same thing. Everybody had education, everybody had healthcare, everybody had housing. They had a good economy. In fact, he even turned the desert into farmland, which with a waterway system that was considered the 8th wonder of the world. Gaddafi did that. Yeah. And then what did we do? We bombed it with depleted uranium bombs. And so we wrecked it. Just like we wrecked Syria. Just like we wrecked Iraq. Just like we're going to try to wreck Iran. So this is your country. This is... and nobody do you remember voting for us to go to war with Syria? Because we didn't. They're doing all this under what's called the AUMF, which is after 9/11, the Congress passed an authorization for the use of military force, and that was so the president could go find the people who did 9/11, no matter where they were in the world. So they could be anywhere. They could be in Afghanistan, they could be in Iraq, they could be in Libya, they could be in Syria, they could be in Somalia, they could be in the Sudan. Wherever they are, the United States is bombing under the AUMF as if we're fighting the people who did 9/11. Syria had nothing to do with 9/11, but they're using that same authorization to invade illegally, occupy, and wreck a country. Same thing we did. We're doing that everywhere. That's what they're using.
Yeah.
And so so Congress never has to vote to go to war. A president never has to declare a war. We could just have endless wars. And this is what Trump, when he ran in 2016, was to stop this stuff. Trump ran to stop this stuff. He said we need to get out of the Middle East and let people take care of their own countries. And that's why this war machine did Russiagate on Donald Trump, because he ran as an anti-interventionist. He exposed their game. And for all of Donald Trump's flaws, which he has many, that's why they hated him. If you listen to CNN, they'll tell you they hate Donald Trump because he's a big liar. What they hated was when Donald Trump told the truth. They didn't hate when he lied. If you think the establishment hates a politician because he's in Washington, D.C. lying, I've got a vaccine I'd like to sell you. The reason why they hated Donald Trump is because he would accidentally, every once in a while, tell you the truth about their game. And the president of the United States, Donald Trump, looked into a camera when he was president and said, we're leaving some troops in Syria for the oil. We're there for the oil. And you're not supposed to say that. And that's why they had to get rid of him also. Because the whole world saw the president of the United States look into a camera and give the game away of the United States foreign policy for the last 60 years, which is to invade smaller, weaker countries and steal their natural resources. So that's the game, and that's the game she just revealed. We're occupying the economic engine of Syria. That's where they make all the food, and that's where all that oil and gas is. And we own it. We own it. She just says it. And there's nobody other to push back at her. No one's going to say, what? When did you buy it? Why do you get to own it? Is there a UN resolution saying you own it? No, quite the opposite. That's an illegal invasion. It's a legal occupation. And now there's no government there anymore. Let me just show you this. So now, get this. This is the new headline, Richard. I don't know if it says U.S. after the United States got in bed with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, legit, to overthrow. The person running Syria is now the head of Al-Qaeda. U.S. pounds ISIS camp in Syria after Assad flees. I find that hard to believe. This is not, I don't believe this either. It says there should be no doubt we will not allow ISIS to reconstitute. A top general said. Well, let me just read you a few paragraphs from this story from Political, which, as we know, is a mouthpiece of the establishment and the war machine. The U.S. carried out a major round of airstrikes on Islamic State targets on Sunday and warned the terror group against trying to regain strength in the country after rebels took over the government. The operation included dozens of airstrikes on over 75 targets involving ISIS operatives in camps using B-52, F-15, and A-10 close air support attack aircraft to ensure that ISIS does not seek to take advantage of the current situation to reconstitute in central Syria. Who said that's a statement from U.S. Central Command. There should be no doubt we will not allow ISIS to reconstitute and take advantage of the current situation. Who said that? General Eric Kurilla. All organizations in Syria should know that we will hold them accountable if they partner with or support ISIS in any way. On Saturday, President-elect Trump, who twice sought to end the U.S. troop presence in Syria, the Pentagon lied to him when he tried to pull troops out of Syria. They lied to him and said they did when they didn't. He called the country a mess and said the United States should not get involved in the conflict. Another reason why the war machine hates him. In remarks on Sunday afternoon, President Biden said the troops will be protected. We will help ensure stability in East. The irony of that is the United States, Turkey, and Israel and Saudi just made sure there was no stability. They're the ones creating instability everywhere they go. Against any threats, our mission against ISIS will be maintained, including security of detention facilities where ISIS fighters are being held as prisoners. The U.S. forces are in the north and east of the country, hundreds of miles from the recent fighting that saw the Turkish-backed HTT, they're considered a terrorist organization, race through the countryside, chasing Assad's troops out of the major city of Aleppo and taking Damascus on Saturday. The United States labels the group as a terrorist organization. So what do you make of that? This story from Politico that the United States is now somehow at war with the terrorists that just helped overthrow Assad's government. What do you make of that, Richard?
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous joke, and if you're committed to fighting terrorists, well, why didn't you do anything against Al Qaeda then?
Right.
Why are you just cherry picking, going after ISIS? ISIS are not the ones with a large ground presence right now. It's Al Qaeda, and you just let them march to Damascus. You didn't do a thing. So I find that very shady. What they're really doing is they're basically helping Israel, because they coordinated their strikes. They did them at the same time, and they've gone and bombed all of the military infrastructure in Syria. So these are things that, if you drink the Kool-Aid and you really believe like Syria is some free, blooming democracy now, well, yeah, it still needs an army, right? It still needs its military infrastructure to defend itself. Well, sorry, that's gone now because Israel and America destroyed it and made sure it's destroyed. There's no air force left. There's no fleet of MiGs. It's gone. The ships, the Navy, gone. Everything. They have destroyed it. That is what they've been blowing up. And as a matter of fact, Al-Qaeda and ISIS benefited from having the United States and Israel act as their air force. You can go and look on Google during the last years and find tons of stories of the United States bombing the people fighting ISIS. They would go and bomb, dozens of Syrian troops, or I think once they even killed hundreds in one go, in one fell swoop. And they would go and attack the Bedouin tribes or other groups that were fighting against Al Qaeda and ISIS, and make no effort to even hide it. And sometimes, half the time, they wouldn't even apologize, right? So they weren't even trying to hide it. And of course, Israel would show up anytime they were suffering some kind of defeat, on strategic or tactical defeat. Israel would magically show up. And that's why they nicknamed it Al-Qaeda's Air Force, because that's effectively what it acted as. So I don't buy this whatsoever. ISIS have been hanging around Palmyra in the desert for the last couple of years after they shriveled and they were crushed. And they were constantly attacking Syrian army positions, and the Americans wouldn't do a thing. So, once again, ask yourself why ISIS, America, and Israel have no problem with each other. It's plain and clear for anyone to see. And if we talk about Trump, by the way, you remember he killed
Soleimani?
Exactly. So I was going to get to the AUMF, because you mentioned the AUMF, which makes it's very ironic, because that comes from the 73 War Powers Resolution, and the whole point of it was to stop U.S. presidents from doing what Nixon did and going and just bombing Cambodia and Laos behind Congress' back. And it's turned into the very opposite of that, because it says you're supposed to notify Congress within 48 hours. You're supposed to ask them for an extension for that military action if it's needed, and you can only use it in self-defense. But they've been using that 2001 AUMF to bomb all these countries that have nothing to do with Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda hates Saddam Hussein. They hate Bashar al-Assad because they couldn't flourish. They couldn't establish any kind of base of operations in Syria or Iraq or Libya, for that matter. Those leaders, Gaddafi, Assad, Saddam, they had no tolerance for this kind of extremism, none. So one of the last places on earth that you would find Al Qaeda is Syria or Iraq or Libya, and of course people don't know that because the media constantly lie to them, and just fill their brains with garbage. So when it comes to Soleimani, Trump used AUMF of 2002, which was for the invasion of Iraq. And he also used Article 51 of the UN Charter to claim self-defense. You can't buy this. And the thing is that no one in Congress did anything. It's one thing for the president to commit acts of war, because that could have easily sparked a war with Iran. But it's another for the Congress to just go along with it. Congress is supposed to hold them to account. There's supposed to be checks and balances. There are no checks and balances when the whole Congress is filled with war criminals, when they're bought and paid for. So, they just let him get away with that. And of course, Pompeo was there with Trump doing this together. And, they kind of went for this. They're the ones who put the troops to where the oil is, as you pointed out, and made sure that they stayed there. And there was a maneuver Trump did where he pulled back a little bit in Syria, but he just allowed Turkey to take those positions. So it was still a NATO presence. They just swapped which NATO units were holding it, and that was bad for the Kurds. The United States stabbed them in the back, but then they work with them to steal the oil. They're just using them.
Hey, have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? I know I do. I recently saw a video he made, and I was shocked. He's in his 80s, and he's still kicking butt and working out and staying active. That's true. What's even more shocking is he's stronger, can work out longer, and even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by just making one change. He says he still feels like he's in his 50s. That's me. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. What is that one thing, Jimmy? Well, let's read on. She says she feels 10 years younger. Her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video, which I watched. He made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Jimmy or by clicking on the link below this video. It will change the way you think about your health. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Jimmy, and click on the link in the description below to watch the video now. I watched it. You won't believe how simple it is. Just a reminder, the legendary Chuck Norris is a whopping 84 years old, and yet he has more energy than me. That's true. He discovered he could create dramatic changes to his health simply focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking the link in the description box below, chuckdefense.com/Jimmy. Come see us doing live shows. We'll be in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only jimmydore.com.